In the hushed hours of night, under a sky veiled with mystery, allow me to unveil a narrative often overlooked in the grand tapestry of the Easter story. A narrative that whispers of Jesus' journey into the depths of the earth, into the very core of death's dominion. Join me as we traverse through the labyrinth of ancient scriptures, unearthing a tale that challenges conventional understanding and deepens our appreciation for the magnitude of Christ's redemptive mission. As the veil of darkness descended upon the third day, a profound hush fell over the disciples. They stood united in their grief, their faith strained against the stark reality of Jesus' crucifixion. Their hearts echoed the somber rhythm of their leader's absence. Amidst their despair, they clung to the hope of resurrection, a belief anchored in the profound words Jesus had spoken during his earthly ministry. Now, in the stillness of their sorrow, they recalled his promise that he would rise on the third day. Yet, as the third day dawned, their anguish deepened, for the tomb lay silent, offering no solace, no reassurance. At that critical juncture, as doubt threatened to eclipse their faith, a sudden commotion shattered the prevailing gloom. It was Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, who first bore witness to the resurrected Christ. Overwhelmed with both trepidation and awe, they carried within them the astounding news of his resurrection. However, as they pondered the implications of this extraordinary event, a profound query arose within them. If Jesus had indeed conquered death, what had transpired during those crucial 3 days spent in the depths of the earth? To comprehend this enigma, let's venture into the heart of the earth, into the enigmatic realm from which Jesus emerged victorious. Allow me to introduce you to the concept of Sheol, a term deeply rooted in ancient Hebrew culture. Sheol, often translated as hell, was not merely a place of torment as commonly perceived. Rather, it represented the abode of the dead, a realm where all souls, both righteous and unrighteous, were believed to reside after death. Upon his death, Jesus, being fully God and fully man, embarked on a journey into Sheol. However, this journey was not one of suffering or defeat. Scripture reveals that Jesus descended into the depths of the earth with a purpose, a mission entrusted to him by his Father. To truly appreciate the significance of this event, let's delve into the symbolic meaning attributed to the third day in biblical context. The number 3 held profound significance in Jewish tradition, symbolizing completion or totality. When Jesus spoke of remaining in his Father's side for 3 days, he alluded to a comprehensive experience encompassing the entirety of Sheol. During those 3 days, Jesus did not merely exist within Sheol. He engaged in a multifaceted ministry. First and foremost, he proclaimed salvation to the imprisoned souls there. Many souls found themselves confined within Sheol, unable to ascend to a state of peace. Jesus' presence brought forth liberation, setting captives free and offering them the prospect of resurrection to new life. Moreover, Jesus extended his compassion to those who had lived and died in ignorance of God's covenant, offering them the opportunity to align themselves with God's righteous standards. However, the depths of the earth were not devoid of opposition. In fact, they were governed by a sinister ruler, the one whom Christians refer to as Satan, the author of death. The word hell comes from the Greek word Hades, which means the unseen abode of the dead. Jesus' journey into Hades wasn't a stroll in the park. It was a purposeful descent into the spiritual underworld. He knew what he was getting into. Hades was ruled by Satan, the one the Bible calls the God of this world. Jesus' arrival disrupted the status quo. In a realm where death held sway, Jesus didn't conquer through brute force. He preached. What did he preach? Paul says he preached salvation to the dead. But who exactly were these dead? Did he go to liberate the prophets who died believing in his coming? Or did he visit those who never heard the gospel message? The Bible doesn't spell out the details, leaving room for reflection and theological debate. Let's now focus on another aspect of this profound event: the release of the righteous souls from the clutches of death. After descending into the depths of the earth, Christ's transformative power led to the resurrection not only of himself, but also of all those who had fallen asleep in death. This act of resurrection was not limited to the immediate followers of Jesus, but extended to encompass all believers throughout history who have faced their own mortality. Through his victory over death, Jesus bridged the chasm between the realms of the living and the dead, offering the promise of eternal life to all who believe in him. Further enhancing the mystery surrounding this event is the limited time frame within which all these events unfolded, a mere 3 days. The brevity of this period underscores the urgency and intensity of Christ's mission. It serves as a reminder that the battle between light and darkness, between life and death, can be both swift and relentless. Within just 3 days, Jesus accomplished what seemed impossible, conquering death and offering salvation. This compressed timeline invites us to reflect on the power of divine intervention and the transformative impact it can have, even within the shortest span of time. Yet, amidst this spiritual upheaval, a profound silence emerged. In the midst of the chaos and transformation, the disciples remained unaware, locked in their own struggles and doubts. They grappled with the perplexing circumstances surrounding Jesus' crucifixion and the perplexing implications of his death. It was as though the grand events unfolding in the spiritual realm were concealed from their view, leaving them in a state of bewildered uncertainty. Now, as we continue our journey into the mysteries of the third day, let's explore a pivotal moment that marked a turning point in the battle between good and evil. It was during this profound moment that Jesus, having completed his redemptive mission, made a triumphant return from the depths of the earth. His resurrection was not merely a personal victory. It was a resounding defeat of the forces of darkness. Upon his resurrection, Jesus appeared to those who had been closest to him during his earthly ministry. He revealed himself first to Mary Magdalene, whose unwavering faith and devotion had led her to become the first witness of his resurrection. Subsequently, he manifested himself to other disciples, including Peter, who had initially denied knowing Jesus out of fear, and Thomas, who had expressed doubts regarding the resurrection. Through these personal appearances, Jesus reaffirmed his identity, offering tangible proof of his resurrection. He allowed them to examine his wounds, the marks left by the nails in his hands and feet, serving as irrefutable evidence of his suffering and ultimate victory. The implications of these appearances were far-reaching. They provided not only personal confirmation for the disciples, but also served to dispel any lingering doubts among his followers. Through these witnesses, the message of the resurrection spread like wildfire, carrying with it the profound implications of humanity's salvation. In conclusion, the 3 days when Jesus was absent from the world were far from ordinary. They encompassed a profound spiritual journey that defied conventional understanding. From his descent into the depths of the earth to his triumph over death, Jesus' actions had reverberating effects on the spiritual and physical realms. During his absence, he proclaimed salvation to imprisoned souls, releasing them from the grip of death. He challenged the dominion of Satan, emerging victorious and offering hope to the righteous. While the disciples grappled with uncertainty, he returned to them, confirming his resurrection and dispelling doubts. As we reflect on these extraordinary events, let us marvel at the courage and determination of Jesus, who dared to venture into the heart of darkness, bringing forth light and conquering death itself. His journey reminds us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope and redemption can prevail. I invite you to embrace the transformative power of his teachings and strive to bring light into the darkness of our world. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery. May the spirit of Easter continue to fill your life with hope and new beginnings. Until next time, may peace be with you. Remember, the realm of the Spirit is vast, complex, and often hidden from our sight. Just as Jesus descended into the depths of the earth to confront the spiritual forces at play, so too can we find strength and guidance in the unseen realms that surround us. The battle between good and evil may be eternal, but the victory has already been won. Jesus' triumph over death serves as a beacon, reminding us that even in the darkest moments, hope and salvation await. As the Easter story unfolds, let us continue to seek the deeper truths that lie beneath the surface, allowing them to illuminate our path toward greater understanding and faith. May the spirit of Easter continue to fill your life with hope and new beginnings. Now, let's dive deeper and continue exploring the rest of this remarkable story. Jesus emerged from the tomb. You heard me right, emerged. He didn't just pop up. He climbed out, shaking off the dust of the grave and striding toward his stunned followers, all while radiating the unmistakable glow of divinity. One of them, Thomas, the skeptic, the doubter, couldn't believe it. Even with Jesus standing right there, Thomas needed more, demanded proof. And what did Jesus do? He offered him a choice, a test. "Touch my wounds," he said, "the marks left by the nails, the spear thrust into my side." It was a private invitation to intimacy, an offer to step closer and believe. In the end, Thomas didn't just touch the wounds. He fell to his knees and proclaimed, "My Lord and my God." The doubter became the believer, all because of a tangible connection. Now, let's rewind to a different moment. After his resurrection, Jesus appeared to a group of disciples, but one, Peter, was missing. Peter, the impulsive, the passionate, the leader among the disciples, wasn't there. And what did Jesus do? He showed up at his house, knocked on the door, and when Mary Magdalene opened it, he asked, "Who do you think I am?" Confused, Peter and the others probably thought he was a ghost. They couldn't believe someone who died could stand before them. So what did Jesus do? He invited them to examine the evidence, to see the nail-pierced hands, the spear wound in his side. Once again, it was a private invitation to a personal encounter, and the result. Peter didn't just recognize Jesus. He fell at his feet and declared, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Leadership passed from Jesus to Peter, all because of an intimate, undeniable encounter. From Thomas to Peter, these men were skeptical, confused, yet Jesus didn't distance himself. He stepped into their reality, met them where they were, and led them to faith through tangible connections. His approach was personal, almost casual, but profoundly effective. If you feel distant from God right now, know this: Jesus doesn't stay hidden. He steps into our lives, breaks bread with us, walks beside us, but Like Thomas and Peter, we must choose to connect, to examine the signs, to listen to his voice, and most importantly, to believe. Because true faith isn't blind. It's rooted in the tangible reality of Jesus. The night is thick with anticipation, heavy with the promise of change. It's here. Inside the tomb, Jesus lay still, his body guarded, his presence veiled. But beneath the stone, something stirred, a quiet earthquake felt only in the spirit. It was a seismic shift in the unseen world, a silent battle fought and won in the heart of darkness. While men slept, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them, Jesus made his move. His spirit left the confines of the grave and plunged into the mysterious realm of Hades. Here, the veil between worlds was thinnest, the boundary between life and death most permeable. This was no ordinary journey. It was a foray into the very seat of power, a direct confrontation with the ruler of the underworld. Jesus did not merely descend into Hades to deliver a message or offer salvation. He went there to wage war, to seize control, and to set captives free. What followed was a clash of titans, a battle between two claimants to ultimate authority. On one side stood Jesus, the embodiment of life, the Son of God, untouched by sin, radiating love and forgiveness. On the other stood Satan, ancient and wily, draped in darkness, offering only despair and captivity. Satan held the keys to death and Hades, symbols of ultimate authority over life and the afterlife. They represented the power to keep souls trapped, to decide who lived and who died, and to control the gates of the underworld. And for millennia, Satan had wielded these keys with a tyrant's grip. Now, however, a challenger had arrived. Jesus, the embodiment of the divine light, was there to wrest control from the hands of the deceiver. The outcome of this struggle would reverberate through eternity. The fate of humanity hung in a balance. The Bible tells us that Jesus, being raised from the dead, did not return empty-handed. He brought back proof of his victory, a triumphant declaration echoing through the ages. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I hold the keys to death and Hades. These words resonate with the finality of a death knell and the promise of resurrection. They mark the moment of transition, the shift in power dynamics that redefined the relationship between humanity and the realm of the dead. In a world grappling with mortality, grief, and the fear of the unknown, no longer would death hold sway, nor would Hades continue its reign unchecked. A new era was dawning, ushered in by the resurrected Christ, who carried within him the keys that unlocked the gates of the afterlife. In the silence of the night, under the watchful gaze of a million stars, the battle for souls raged. Jesus was not accompanied by legions of angels or thunderous displays of divine power. His strength lay in his divinity, his humanity, and his unwavering commitment to the divine mission. There were no swords drawn or shields raised, only wills clashing and claims to supremacy. Satan, taken aback by the audacity of this intrusion, trembled at the sight of the sinless one descending into his domain. The foundations of his kingdom shook. His grip on the keys wavered, and the gates of hell, once impenetrable, creaked open. This was a victory hard won, the culmination of a lifetime spent bridging the gap between humanity and the divine, teaching love, forgiveness, and the relentless pursuit of truth. This was the moment when the scales of justice tipped, when the narrative of good and evil shifted, and when the promise of redemption became a reality. This is a pivotal point in human history. The victor bore the weight of humanity's sins on his shoulders, the wounds of betrayal and suffering still fresh. Yet, in that moment, all was forgotten except the task at hand. Satan's deception, his grip on the hearts and minds of men, and the desperate need for liberation. This was a war unlike any other, fought not with weapons, but with the power of the divine. Not on a physical plane, but in the depths of the human soul. And in the end, it was a war that humanity could not have waged alone. Now, let's bring this to life with another vivid scene. Imagine yourself standing at the entrance to Hades. Before you, the realm of the dead stretches out, a silent, shadowy expanse. The air grows colder, and you feel a weight pressing down, the heaviness of countless souls resting here. Suddenly, there's a commotion at the gates. A figure strides forward, a commanding presence that seems to push back the shadows. It is Jesus, victorious and radiant. Behind him, the oppressive darkness parts, revealing glimpses of a vast, luminous kingdom. As Jesus reaches out, he takes the keys, weighty and cold in his hands. The metal moans, protesting the transfer of power. And in that moment, the gates swing open, releasing a rush of invigorating energy. The souls within, freed from their shadowy bonds, step out, blinking, as if waking from a deep sleep. Some are cautious, others embrace the newfound light. Jesus offers words of comfort, reassurance, and hope, breaking the chains of fear and uncertainty. As more souls awaken and join them, they form a procession, marching forward together toward the light. The once oppressive realm begins to shrink, the shadows retreating as the gates close behind them. Now, looking back, you see a faint glow emanating from within, a sign that the long night is over. You watch as Jesus leads his followers away from the darkness and toward a path illuminated by his presence. This moment marks a turning point, a triumph over adversity, and the promise of a journey toward healing and wholeness. It's a testament to the enduring human spirit and the transformative power of hope in the darkest of times. The ripples of this victory extended far beyond the borders of Hades. It echoed in the streets of Jerusalem, where Mary Magdalene and the other women stood at the mouth of the tomb as the angel announced Jesus' resurrection. A new sense of purpose filled them. They were no longer mourners, but heralds of a new dawn. Their grief gave way to wonder and anticipation, their fear to unshakable faith. News of the resurrection spread like wildfire, carrying with it the promise of transformation and renewal. Those who had known Jesus, his disciples, his friends, and his family gathered, their faces etched with a mix of disbelief and longing. When the women shared their experience, something extraordinary happened. Doubt melted away, replaced by awe and recognition. This wasn't just a miracle, it was a revolution, a cosmic upheaval that challenged everything they thought they knew about life, death, and the divine. In that moment, they didn't just believe in the resurrection. They lived it, feeling its power course through their veins and illuminating their path forward. This wasn't just a moment of victory. It was a call to action. The resurrected Christ wanted to be seen, to be touched, to be believed in. He appeared to doubting Thomas, not to condemn his skepticism, but to offer him proof, to let him feel the wounds that bore witness to the truth. He showed himself not as a distant deity, but as the living embodiment of love, forgiveness, and second chances. This wasn't just a resurrection. It was a revelation, a glimpse into the heart of the divine. Jesus didn't just come back to life. He brought back proof of his divinity, confirming what many had sensed all along, that he wasn't just a teacher, he was the Messiah, the Son of God. This is a pivotal moment, a testament to the enduring power of faith and the triumph of hope over despair. It was a victory not only for Jesus, but for all those who dared to believe in the face of adversity. It was a victory that echoed through the ages, resonating with anyone who had ever faced death, loss, or the relentless march of time. This was a moment that defied the boundaries of human understanding, a moment that transcended the limitations of language and culture, a moment that spoke to the deepest yearnings of the human soul. And in the end, it was a moment that changed the world forever. As I pondered this moment, I can't help but feel a surge of emotions, a mix of awe, wonder, and gratitude. To think that in that one moment, the balance of power shifted, the gates of hell were opened, and the chains of death were broken is truly humbling. It reminds me of the fragility of human understanding and the boundless mysteries of the divine. And as I reflect on this profound event, I find myself drawn to the lessons it holds, the messages it carries, and the hope it offers. I see a reminder of the transformative power of faith, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unwavering pursuit of truth and justice. In the face of adversity, I see an example of courage, determination, and the relentless pursuit of a greater good. And above all, I see a testament to the enduring power of love. The kind of love that knows no bounds, that conquers all, and that binds us all together. And now, let's continue with the rest of this fascinating story. Let's pull back the curtain. How do you feel right now? Anxiety's easing, hope stirring within you. That's the effect this story intends to create. I sense it in my audience. Your responses, your comments tell me that Jesus' victory over death and hell resonates deeply. But our journey is far from over. We have more revelations to explore. So brace yourself, because we're about to plunge into a realm where heaven and earth collide, and the very nature of existence is challenged. I won't keep you waiting. A monumental event unfolds before our eyes, forever altering the relationship between the spiritual and the material. Brace yourself, because what I'm about to reveal could reshape your understanding of faith and reality itself. And let me emphasize this: this is not merely a tale from antiquity. No, it's a window into the eternal conflict between the forces of light and darkness. What happens next will impact us all. So fasten your spiritual seatbelts, because we're about to dive headfirst into the chronicles of a battle that transcends time. A hush falls over the cosmos. Angels pause in mid-flight, their wings still, as if holding their breath. For the moment has arrived, the hour of judgment is upon us, and the victor stands revealed. Jesus strides triumphantly from the abyss, keys of brass held high, not as plunder, but as symbols of a conquest won. Death, once the ultimate adversary, now lies subdued, banished to the shadows. This is not a fleeting victory, but a resounding defeat. Satan's reign of terror in the underworld, stretching back to the fall of man, is officially over. Hell's gates, once impenetrable, now swing open, yielding to the force of divinity. But it's not just brute strength that has achieved this. No, this triumph is rooted in love. Love for a fallen humanity. Love that led the Son of God to brave the desolate depths of the underworld. But here's the paradox. While Jesus conquers hell, he doesn't destroy it. He doesn't raze its foundations or obliterate its inhabitants. Instead, he ushers forth the righteous souls that have languished there, prisoners of a system they never asked to be a part of. Among them, patriarchs from the dawn of humanity, figures like Abel, the first martyr Enoch, taken by God, and Noah, survivor of the great flood, along with the prophets who dared to speak gods of unfaith. They emerge, blinking in the sudden sunlight, freed from the clutches of a prison that defied time itself. And this is not just a spectacle. No, it's a turning point, a shift in the very fabric of existence. The rules of the game have changed. Death, once feared as the final arbiter, now loses its sting. It no longer holds dominion over those who believe, because the shackles that bound them have been shattered. You might wonder, why does this matter to me today, in a world grappling with loss, disease, and the constant specter of mortality? The answer is simple. Because this event is not just a relic of the past. It's a precedent, a promise, and a key to our understanding of the eternal conflict we're all caught up in. The victory over hell is not just Jesus's. It's ours, too. It's a triumph hard won, paved with sacrifice and steeped in divine love. But let's not forget the stakes of this battle. Had Satan prevailed in the underworld, the implications would have been catastrophic. Humanity's fate would have been sealed. The balance of power would have tipped irreversibly. But Jesus refused to accept that outcome. He faced down the personifications of evil, of sin, of death itself, and emerged victorious. However, the aftermath of any great battle is a perilous time, a moment when the dust settles and the true cost of victory becomes clear. It's a phase fraught with challenges, with wounds yet to be healed, and enemies licking their next move. In the immediate aftermath of Christ's victory over Satan, the world appears to be in a state of transition, caught between the old order and the dawning of a new reality. The veil between the spiritual and material realms is thinner than ever, allowing glimpses of the eternal conflict that rages beyond our everyday perception. Meanwhile, on the earthly plane, the full import of Christ's triumph is yet to be grasped. People go about their daily lives, many oblivious to the seismic shift that has occurred in the spiritual sphere. They carry on, burdened by the limitations of their existence, unaware that the chains of death have been broken. However, this tranquility is deceptive, a lull before the storm. The forces of darkness, though momentarily stunned, are far from defeated. They are gathering themselves, regrouping, and devising strategies to regain lost ground. The battle for humanity's soul is far from over, and the coming skirmishes will be fought not in the ethereal realm of the afterlife, but on the familiar ground of the human experience. For Satan, now stripped of his claim over death, is forced to adapt his tactics. His grip on the hearts and minds of men remains, and he will use every tool at his disposal to maintain it. As we delve deeper into this unfolding drama, we must brace ourselves for the challenges that lie ahead. For the path to ultimate victory is often paved with trials and tribulations. But fear not, for the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead resides within you, empowering you to stand firm against the coming darkness. So, stay tuned. Hold fast to your faith, for what follows will test your resolve and deepen your understanding of the epic struggle that plays out not just beyond the stars, but within the chambers of your own heart. You might be thinking, when will these cosmic conflicts end? When will we reach a lasting peace? The answer lies in the journey itself, in the choices we make in the face of adversity, in the battles we fight and win, not just on the outside, but deep within our souls. Each victory, no matter how small, echoes with the triumph of Christ over hell, paving the way for a more profound, more enduring peace. This is not a temporary truce. No, this is a call to arms, a call to join the ranks of those who walk in the light, who choose love over fear, faith over doubt. This is a summons to be a part of the solution, to be the difference between despair and hope, between darkness and dawn. And remember, you are not alone in this journey. You are part of a lineage, a tapestry woven with the threads of countless souls who have walked this path before you. Their struggles, their triumphs, their faith all resonate within you, empowering you to stand tall against the encroaching gloom. But the question remains, what will you do with this knowledge? How will you channel the echoes of those who came before? The choice is yours. Will you shrink in the face of the approaching darkness, or will you rise to meet it head on? And here's the crux of the matter. This moment, this crossroad between shadow and light, is not just about winning battles. It's about embracing a way of life, a commitment to values that transcend the ephemeral, that reach into the very core of your being. You see, this is not just a story. It's a blueprint for living, for thriving in the midst of life's inevitable storms. It's a testament to the indomitable spirit that resides within each one of us, waiting to be unleashed. So go forth, my friends, armed with the knowledge that you are more than a passive observer. You are a participant in an age-old drama, a drama that will determine not just the fate of the cosmos, but the very essence of your soul. Embrace your role in this epic narrative, for it is a story worth fighting for, a story worth living for, a story that is ultimately about you. And as you step into this grand adventure, know this, you are not alone. A vast army of spirits, of saints, of ancestors, and most importantly, of angels stand alongside you. They cheer you on, bolster your resolve, and remind you that the darkness, no matter how overwhelming, cannot extinguish the light that burns within. As I write these words, the night has settled around me, No crickets chirp, no distant cars disturb the air, and the only sound that reaches me is the soft sigh of the wind through old trees. It's a stillness that invites reflection, a quiet that beckons me to ponder the profound story that unfolded beneath the cover of darkness. It's a tale of Jesus, yes, but not the triumphant Jesus of the nativity scene, nor the crucified Savior we remember every Good Friday. Tonight, we delve into a lesser-known aspect of his life, his harrowing journey into the depths of the earth, a descent into the realm of the dead. This isn't a biblical episode many of us associate with Easter. Yet, it holds a key to understanding the very essence of his resurrection and what it means for us. Imagine, if you will, a moment after Jesus' crucifixion, when Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin, boldly requests Jesus' body. With permission granted, he wraps the lifeless form in a clean linen cloth, places it in a new tomb, and then rolls a massive stone against the entrance, sealing Jesus within. But wait, this isn't the end of a story. For there are accounts, primarily found in the Gospel of Matthew, that tell of something extraordinary happening after this. In Matthew's narrative, we learn that during this time there were earthquakes. A multitude of tombs were opened, and the bodies of many saints who had slept in them rose. But that's not all. The risen ones didn't stay confined to their earthly remains. They emerged, robed in white, and walked through the city streets, appearing to many people. Astonishing, isn't it? This wasn't a scene from a fantasy novel or an ethereal dream. It was a historical event recorded in the Bible, an event so significant that it altered the course of human history. And what about the guards stationed outside the tomb? Matthew tells us they fled, overwhelmed by the divine event they had witnessed. And it doesn't stop there. The resurrected Jesus, the cornerstone of our faith, made his presence felt in Jerusalem itself, shaking the very foundations of death's domain. He didn't just vanquish death, he seized the keys to death and Hades, the power of the underworld. He broke open the shackles of the grave, liberating countless souls. It was a seismic event, a cosmic shift that reverberated throughout the universe. Let's pause for a moment and reflect on the gravity of these events. We typically focus on the resurrection as the central event of Easter. Rightly so, because it marks the triumph of life over death, hope over despair, and faith over doubt. But what if I told you there's more to this story, a deeper, more profound aspect, often overlooked? What if I suggested that the true significance of Easter lies not just in the resurrection itself, but in the victory that preceded it, the victory in Hades? You might be thinking, what does this mean for me? How does this ancient tale resonate in my life today? Allow me to share a revelation that has transformed my understanding of faith and hope. This isn't just a relic of the past. It's a living truth with implications that touch every facet of our lives. The idea that Jesus descended to hell or Hades is deeply rooted in Christian tradition. It finds its basis in scriptural accounts like Psalm 16, where King David, speaking prophetically, declares, "I believe I shall look on the Lord's goodness in the land of the living. Wait for me in the realm of the dead. For you have redeemed me, O Lord, O my God, and you have brought me back with you." Early Christians saw this psalm as a messianic text, believing David was foreshadowing Christ's journey to Hades. But the affirmation that Jesus descended into hell is most notably found in the Apostles' Creed, a foundational statement of faith developed in the early centuries. This creed, along with the Nicene Creed, was a way for Christians to profess their beliefs and distinguish themselves from other philosophies and cults that had sprung up during that time. When the apostles gathered in the 2nd century, they sought to summarize their faith in a clear, concise statement. And in doing so, they included the phrase, "descended into hell," underscoring the belief that Jesus didn't merely conquer death, but also liberated the realm of the dead from the clutches of Satan. Now, you might wonder, why is this detail so crucial? Why did early Christians emphasize Jesus' descent to Hades? To understand their perspective, let's transport ourselves back to the cultural and religious landscape of the early church. The year is roughly 325 AD, and we find ourselves at the First Council of Nicaea, a historic gathering of Christian leaders convened by the Roman Emperor Constantine. The primary purpose of this council was to address a theological dispute surrounding the nature of Jesus Christ. Was he truly divine, fully God? Or was he, as some argued, a created being and therefore subordinate to the Father? But among the many challenges confronting early Christianity, there was another. The Arian controversy, named after Arius, a priest who denied the divinity of Christ. Arius asserted that Jesus was indeed a special creation, the first and highest of God's creations, but not co-eternal or equal to God the Father. He argued that the Father alone was truly God, while Jesus, though divine in nature, was still a created being. This teaching threatened the very core of Christian faith, which affirmed the Trinity, the belief in one God existing in 3 persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all equally divine. Amidst this theological turmoil, the inclusion of the phrase "descended into hell" in the Apostles' Creed took on a deeper significance. It served as a defense against those who sought to diminish Jesus Christ. By affirming that Jesus descended to Hades, early Christians were declaring his victory over the forces of darkness. It was a bold statement of their belief in a risen, conquering Christ who had traversed the realm of the dead and emerged victorious. As I pondered this rich history, I couldn't help but think of the broader message it conveys. It's not just about Jesus' triumph over death, but his triumph over deception, doubt, and denial. In moments when faith is challenged, when doubts creep in, and when the darkness of disbelief threatens to consume us, we can turn to the Creed as a beacon of truth. Just as our ancestors in faith stood firm against those who denied the divinity of Christ, we too can stand firm in our beliefs. The descent into hell is a potent reminder that no force, no matter how deceptive or seemingly powerful, think about it, the victory in Hades was not just a private affair between Jesus and the powers of darkness. It had real-world consequences that continue to shape our world today. Satan, once boasting dominion over death, was stripped of his keys. He was banished to the realm of deception, where he spins lies and weaves doubt to try and trick the unwary. The war that began in Hades didn't end there. It spilled out onto the streets of Jerusalem and into the hearts and minds of men. Remember, the immediate aftermath of Jesus' resurrection was not a peaceful one. The disciples were cowed in fear, hiding behind closed doors, afraid of what might happen if the world knew they followed Jesus. They were confronted with a choice: either deny their faith and live, or embrace their beliefs and face potential persecution. The stakes were high, the pressure immense, and yet they chose faith. They chose to believe in the risen Lord, despite the absence of tangible proof. And then came the Great Commission, Jesus' command for his disciples to go into the world and share the good news of salvation. This wasn't a call to retreat into the safety of small groups. It was a call to action, a challenge to confront the world and its systems, its doubts, its fears, and its deceptions. From that moment, the war shifted to the realm of hearts and minds. It's a battle that rages still, a battle we all face daily. We may not always be aware of the conflict, but it's there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for us to make our stand. The question is, what side will you choose? Will you embrace the light of faith, knowing it might lead to storms? Or will you succumb to the darkness, hoping for a fleeting moment of peace? As I sit here in the fading light, surrounded by the sounds of the night, I realize that the war isn't over. It continues in the boardrooms of multinational corporations, in the halls of government, in the classrooms of universities, and in the subtle whispers of everyday life. The victory in Hades equips us for this war. It reminds us that death has lost its sting, and that we are not alone in this battle. We have the risen Lord at our side, ready to guide us through the darkest of nights and lead us to the brightest of victories.